Is first of all we have a talk by the lovely Justin the WonderBear, which I think makes him sound a bit like a kind of superhero. And after that we have, he's going to do a talk about bear culture.
Bear brownies, which will come at a point halfway through. For those of you, if any of you are diabetic, please don't have any. Because bear food is really tasty, but there is a reason we're this big. They don't contain any nuts either, so if anyone's nut allergy, they're fine, but not if you're gluten allergic. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about bear culture. Being a self-identified bear, cub, chub, gay man, whatever comes along, I'm going to reflect a little bit about my journey and kind of some of the stuff that I picked up, because actually when you first come out as a bear, or you're kind of coming out as proto-gay, little young gay boy, kind of work out what you are, you hear this phrase like bear, and there's a whole series of other bits, like otter and wolf. For those of you who identify as ladies who hang out with bears, you're a goldilocks. And on your handout there is a full dictionary of bear terms, so you can look really knowledgeable with all your mates. So we can go on to the next one, thanks. So join me in this slightly scary journey into bear culture. What I will say is if you make it on Glee, I think this is a cultural identifier that you've really made as a cultural grouping. And this was actually from Rolling Stones, which means Stone magazine, which means we've really made it. We are here and we're here to stay. We go on to the next one. Thanks. Okay, so the other thing I've kind of done when I was sitting down to write this talk, write being an interesting word for it, I have had on my bookshelf, because I kind of specialise in queer health issues generally. And so I've collected all these weird books over the years, and I have this kind of encyclopedic LGBT health library, and in it there are 3 textbooks on bear culture, where people went around and they interviewed and they kind of came up with really wise things to say about bears. And one of the books was talking about this guy. He wrote a book about the rise and fall of gay culture. He was talking about kind of cultural identity. And he made this weird statement of bears being one of the most violent assaults that gay men have made to date against these overgrown bodies of urban homosexuals. And it made me think of the kind of bears rising out of the forest, like revenge against the body fascist gym bunnies. It's not quite that dramatic. But it was this kind of concept of gay bear culture as this rejection of body fascism. And some people do kind of see it in that way. I think actually most of us just enjoy it and get on with it. So what is a bear? Well, the Da Vinci bear. I love this bear. So in terms of kind of there is a book called The Bear Handbook, by the way. It's about 1985 it was written. It's quite cute, but the first chapter is like, how do you know if you're a bear? And then it's like, well, you have to be this certain size, and it goes, actually, it just doesn't matter. It's like, however you feel. Being a bear is much more about your attitude and kind of your approach to the gay community than it is about necessarily you have to be bigger than 36-inch waist, and you can't find clothes in Gap. Not even an American Gap. And it's not about hair, although like some of the definitions in the handout you've got, like you can be an otter if you're hairy, but if you're not hairy then you're technically a dolphin. And it kind of goes on. But the big thing that comes out is actually the bear community is particularly more in Europe actually and internationally. In the US it's got a little bit up itself. Is really about having an attitude which says actually we're out to be relaxed and have fun, and we don't really ascribe to this concept that everyone has to be gym-toned, clubbing and on drugs the whole time. And there are loads of other ways to have fun, lots of them involving food and sex, and food and sex together. But you know, there is a reason we're this size. So yeah, this was a wonderful, when I was hunting through it I was like, oh my god, Camilla Paglia, who's like written loads of interesting theory, those of you who are into queer theory will recognise it, wrote about bears, which I found quite surprising. And she was kind of saying, actually, this whole thing about the gay bears are more virile because we've got hair, and any of you who are losing hair like me will know that that's because I've got loads of testosterone. And it's really a sign of virility that I'm getting bald. But actually, she also had this wonderful bit about the bear's fatness resembling not the warlike Viking mass of a Hell's Angel, but the capacious bosom of the primal earth. And even better, this concept that the gay bears is simultaneously animalistic and nurturing, a romp in the wild followed by a nap time on a comfy cushion. It sounds pretty good to me. So I think this really sells it actually as a concept. So where do bears come from? Well, no one really knows, and there's a whole load of argument in the theory side. In the community side, people are like, who cares? We've got a label, we've got a flag now. That's the bear flag for anyone who doesn't know. I was saying to someone earlier, it's a bit confusing because this bear paw, which kind of is in a lot of like bear t-shirts, we have our own t-shirts as well. But you see straight people with the tattoos of the bear paw. And I mean, I quite enjoy playing straight or gay, but the bear paw tattoo really confuses me. And similarly with lesbians with bear paws, I'm not sure whether it's the lesbians with dogs, and so it's bear paw thing or what, but is this really bit about, this is very much identified with the bear community, and then other people are using the same logos and identity. And there are some groups in America who use the same colour coding for the flag, but it's for something completely different. So very confusing. Anyway, where did they come from? Well, there's a whole body of stuff that kind of says bears came out of the HIV epidemic, and what it was about was people in the gay community saying, well, everyone who had AIDS was skinny and thin, and therefore people who were healthy and HIV negative were fat, and therefore this community grew up around idolising fat. And that might have existed for a bit, but actually, as I'll show you in the history bit, we predate AIDS, and so it doesn't really hold up as a theory. There's a thing about gay tribalism, and it comes back to this kind of thing of the bears coming from the woods, and certainly some of the stuff from the 1970s that's written. You hear about like these communes of gay bears, and they literally live in the woods. Like, not in camping, but they have like cabins and bonfires and barbecues. And they sit around generally smoking pot and eating lots of food and having fun. But this concept of almost a kind of gay tribalism. The anti-body fascism have touched on this concept of rejection of, in order to be a good gay, you've got to be a skinny gay, and that seems to still hold true. But actually at the root of it, it's about good food, friendship, and having fun. And this is from an American academic who I had the fortune to know quite well, and unfortunately passed away a few years ago. And he really founded the gay health movement in the US. And he was interviewed for one of these academic bear books. And the bit he gets to hear about the bear, this is all about some Freudian reversal to whole body tactility of childhood. Well, any sex that involves my whole body is a good sex, so I think that sells me for one. But this also idea of the gay bear as this kind of sexual persona, the mythic father-mother. And then he goes a little bit off on one because there's Egyptian river gods in here, Roman river gods and rollicking cherubs. Sounds alright. So when I talked a bit about where it comes from, actually when you try and track down where different bits of our community come from, it's quite interesting in that we often track our community history by whether a club exists or whether something was written in a newspaper, but tracking how communities evolved is something that's quite hard for the gay and lesbian community. But going back, the very first kind of gay big guys group was called Girth and Mirth. And that's actually in 1976, their first meeting. It started in San Francisco. By 1979, there were about 12 groups across the US, and then you started to see European groups appear in the 1980s. The who's who in the zoo, I can't, if anyone can find an article, the copy of this article, please let me know via Ingo, because 1979, a journalist wrote down this article about who's who in the zoo, and it was kind of saying, in the gay community we have these bears, and then we have these otters, and then we have like these muscle bunnies, and you know, and really kind of set out this kind of cliqueism, but also really giving us these animal names. And the bear language is really attributed to that. 1987, 86, you see the first kind of magazines starting up and big community meetings. 1987 in the UK was the first time the gay press talked about bigger gay men in a kind of reasonable way in an article, and started to unpack this concept as well. For those of you, and I have to confess that I didn't come in until this kind of part of the chronology. The good thing about fat is it keeps out your wrinkles as well, actually, so no one really knows how old you are. I do just about remember the end of bulk. But there was bulk, XXL, and various clubs came and went, magazines came and went, but there is this kind of chronology of community which sets out. And now I'm going to come a bit on to, I suppose, the final sentence on this one. This was written by a guy, again, in one of these textbooky things about saying, actually, but what is it that makes fat men so suckable, fuckable, beautiful? What particular aspects and characteristics can we isolate and drool over lubriciously? I dare anyone to get lubriciously into a sentence, so voluptuously as well. So bear clothes and that, my able assistants will start to hand around the brownies at this point to keep you going. I am, of course, modelling the bear stereotype outfit. It's not quite a flannel shirt, although in this weather it probably should be. T-shirts. There was, about 10 years ago, you'd be really hard pushed to find a bear T-shirt. Now I'm modelling WonderBear, which I bought in Forbidden Planet, of all places. There are loads of bear spin-off T-shirts, and pretty much if it's a cartoon, a bear, or a sci-fi T-shirt, you're in a pretty good territory for meeting our cultural landmarks. And then the rest of it is pretty stereotyped, but actually if you ever go to a bear club, this kind of plays out with variations and a bit of leather thrown in. So now coming on to bear food, we go to the next one. We even have our own cookbooks, not just one but two. And the brownies that are coming around now are what are called Lone Star brownies. Just to give you a sense of what you're doing to your arteries. They taste really good, but I don't think I've ever made any brownies before that require an entire pack of butter to go in. No, well, and to be fair, I held off on the icing, which was another pack of butter with 2 packs of icing sugar, plus 2 packs of chocolate, and I kind of felt that was a little bit too much. So, but do enjoy them. Go to the next one. And bears have become like this global phenomena. I was just looking at some of the clubs that are out there, and they're all over the place. You can find bear clubs in Lisbon, Buffalo, Germany, the Czech Republic, Croatia, Athens, and in Bristol. So wherever you go, you can find a bear. So now the bit that you're obviously all gagging for is bear sex. I thought this was quite impressive. It's not, I'm not sure you can see the oral sex between real bears. The wonder of Google images. And you know, the whole concept of bear sex has kind of evolved in terms of people actually talking about what they desire and what they find attractive. And part of the thing about bear culture kind of coming much more mainstream is people can say, this is what I'm into. Where not that long ago actually most people couldn't say, oh, I find that big hairy guy attractive. And it's great. You do find, particularly in the US, there's a lot more discussion about polyamory, and certainly one of the things that kind of opened my eyes a bit about polyamory was going to some of the US bear stuff. And people were kind of, yeah, I'm in a really great 12-year relationship with my boyfriend and my boyfriend. I was going, it's great, and my mind going, oh my god, I don't know how to process. But that's another talk. But you know, gays are good at technology adaptation. If it's got a plug in it, we can find a way to adapt it to what we need. And what's great is you start off with Grindr and gaydar, and then like pretty fast we've adapted to every single niche in our community, and you can find a bear wherever you are in the world. I know some of you have come tonight because I posted a shout on Growler. You know, I can shout out to 3,000 bears in London at 7 o'clock in the morning. We're on their app. Which, this was quite impressive. And we've got websites, and there's not just one app, that's the other thing, there are like 3 or 4 now, and they keep multiplying. So bears know how to play. I'm going to touch a little bit on chasers. I'm not going to read out the whole thing.
Yeah, singing!
I really won't. My boyfriend will tell you that singing is not a good thing for me. When we did karaoke at like a 3rd date, I'm amazed he's still with me. But what was great about this was someone's personal ad. They pasted it, and I was just like, wow, that A, it's amazingly creative they came up with it, but B, this really puts out there what they're into and what they desire. And the concept of chasers, for those of you who don't know what a chaser is basically a guy who's into bears or chubs, who's into bigger guys. And you get thin chasers, you get big chasers, you get young chasers, old chasers, and it's really starting to come out now. There's more kind of mainstream discussion about actually people saying, yeah, I'm a chaser, and get over it. And I thought this was just a fantastic kind of version of it. The other bit that's a slight variation, which is I kind of personally have mixed feelings about, is this concept of gainers and feeders. And gainers are guys that have a sexual fetish associated with getting bigger. And feeders are guys who get off on feeding someone to make them bigger. And if that's your thing, great. But it is a kind of slightly different twist. And these are just some things that are pulled from one of the message boards around gainers and feeders about this idea we gain mutually with a guy and we grow super chubby together, swoon. Great, it's his thing, and he's getting it out there and he's finding someone to do his thing with, and I think that's great, but it is being aware that it's there as well. Because if you don't know you're on a date with a feeder, and having had one of these experiences where I went to the loo, came back and my plate was fuller than when I left. And I kind of didn't think about it particularly, but then I did when there was food, there were extra chocolates in my bag when I left at the end of the evening. It was all a bit kind of, here, have some more, but not really explicit. So I'm going to talk briefly about bear culture, just to show how we're better. We've got books. I wouldn't say any of them are great works of literature. But amazingly, we've moved beyond porn, which is probably the sign that you're a real cultural group, because every little fetish niche has porn. That's what the internet's for. But when you start moving that beyond Kindle books into real books, those of us that still read real books, you really kind of establish. And these are 2 real books, covers not preceding, actually, that aren't about sex. I was a bit disappointed, to be honest. And we have comics. You flip on to the next one. So we have lots of comics. It goes back to that sci-fi, slightly nerdy side of us. And the next one. And then we combine comics and porn. It's all there with the joy of the internet. We have films, which again, people probably may have heard of Bear City, and there's also an American TV series which is broadcast through one of the cable channels called Where the Bears Are, and it's now in series 3, which is great. Won't say all the acting's great, but it's a start. So what I've kind of done is given you a bit of a kind of canter through bear culture and laid it all out, perhaps spread eagle for you, but hopefully giving you insight about where to start with bears. On your handout there are some web links, there's a dictionary so you can sound really smart, and giving you a bit of an introduction to bear culture. Thank you very much.